In this randomized trial, it lowered blood pressure in just 8 weeks. And in this 12-month study, it reduced both plaque size and LDL cholesterol. In fact, a lot of cardiologists can't believe how well something natural improves blood flow. Hi, I'm Danny Curtin. Thank you for joining me today. These statistics are just a few of the reasons why nattokinase has become one of the most talked about cardiovascular supplements today. But this isn't a new enzyme. I was first introduced to nattokinase more than 2 decades ago, and I've been benefiting ever since. But I've also been benefiting from other enzymes that increase the cardiovascular benefits of nattokinase, and they add important health advantages of their own. That's why when you do a simple search for nattokinase, it can be confusing. You'll find pure nattokinase only products. I've actually reviewed those in the past. You'll find nattokinase and serrapeptase. You'll find formulas with 3, 4, 5, or even 11 different enzymes. And you'll even find ingredient names that sound like they're just AI generated. And somehow, every company claims their formula is the best. So how do you actually tell the difference? Well, that's what this video is about. Let's start with the first enzyme I always look for in a nattokinase blend, serrapeptase. In the enzyme world, nattokinase is the circulation specialist and serrapeptase is the cleanup crew. For injuries, serrapeptase assists in the breakdown and elimination of damaged tissue. This idea is key because the slowest part of the healing process is getting rid of all the dead stuff. And if you're over 40, you already know this. Do you heal as fast as you did when you were 12? Exactly. For inflammation, serrapeptase breaks down the very chemicals that allow inflammation and pain to spiral out of control, like bradykinin and histamine. And for mucus, serrapeptase helps to break down mucin, the protein that makes mucus thick and sticky. That's why serrapeptase was used for decades as an anti-inflammatory in Europe and Asia. One of those products, Danzen, it was used for respiratory conditions, pain, swelling, and post-surgical recovery. And it was sold as a pharmaceutical. Right, you heard that. Even they know it works. In one clinical trial following wisdom tooth surgery, serrapeptase significantly reduced swelling and improved jaw mobility compared to placebo in just a few days. And in another study, serrapeptase was more effective than NSAIDs for reducing pain and inflammation associated with grade 2 ankle sprains. So you can see with the inclusion of serrapeptase, we're not talking about circulation anymore. We're broadening the appeal with inflammatory control, immune regulation, and tissue recovery. With all that said, not only do I think serrapeptase is the most beneficial nattokinase add-on, but its inclusion is how I evaluate any one of these blends. It's the combination of these two enzymes, nattokinase and serrapeptase. That is where the synergy gets really interesting. So let me give you an example. Let's say you have an injury. And by injury, I mean any type of inflammation. So you start taking serrapeptase for some relief. But there's another problem. Inflammation itself can make your blood thick and sticky, even if your blood is otherwise healthy. That's why taking nattokinase with serrapeptase can be so beneficial. While serrapeptase cleans up damaged tissue and speeds recovery, nattokinase keeps fibrin and other blood thickening impurities in check. Now, this can happen in the opposite direction as well. Inflammation doesn't just come from injury or immune stress. Thick and dirty blood can actually create inflammation too. In those cases, adding serrapeptase to nattokinase helps clean up new inflamed tissue, while the nattokinase optimizes blood flow. That's why these two enzymes make so much sense taken together. One supports circulation, the other supports cleanup and recovery. Now, what if you added a third enzyme? Well, if you did, it should probably be bromelain. Funny enough, you may have actually used this enzyme before, even if you've never heard of it. Meat tenderizer, the powder you sprinkle on a steak to soften it up, that product is primarily made of bromelain. That's literally what it does. Bromelain breaks down protein. And that's what I think is so cool about enzymes. Sometimes the science, it sounds incredibly complicated. But at the end of the day, bromelain is just an enzyme from a pineapple. Now, the highest concentration can be found in the stem, but who's going to eat that? However, there is some bromelain in the fruit. But unless you're planning on eating pineapple every single day, all day long, you're never going to get the same amount of bromelain that you're going to find in a concentrated supplement. Now, bromelain works a little bit differently than nattokinase and serrapeptase. That's what makes it such a great addition to a multi-enzyme blend. Research suggests it influences inflammation, immune function, tissue recovery, and everything else on this list. Go ahead and pause the video if you want that full science lecture. But to simplify it, bromelain can influence how the immune system functions and how inflammation is regulated. And for many of you watching, an overactive immune system is just as bad, if not worse, than an underactive immune system. Bromelain balances that response. Now, by combining nattokinase, serrapeptase, and bromelain together, you've suddenly built a formula supporting circulation, inflammation, tissue recovery, respiratory health, and immune function all at the same time. Honestly, this is where the really good formulations start to separate themselves, because companies that understand how these enzymes work together will add supporting enzymes like papain and broader protease blends that can make real logical sense, especially in the digestive tract, because even though these formulas are designed to be taken on an empty stomach, these enzymes will inevitably encounter food in the digestive tract. If and when that happens, the addition of these broader protease ingredients can help break down any dietary proteins first so that you still obtain the systemic benefit from nattokinase, serrapeptase, and bromelain. To me, that's smart formulation logic. But this is also where companies can start to get cute, because at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, is this ingredient unique, or is this just another enzyme with a fancier name? That's one of the reasons I'm not a huge fan of lumbrokinase blends. Actually, the primary manufacturer of this enzyme recommends that you don't combine lumbrokinase with any other proteolytic enzymes because they could actually degrade and make lumbrokinase useless. Now, if the whole point of these formulas is enzyme synergy, that starts to become a little questionable. And yes, lumbrokinase comes from earthworms, which means somewhere out there, there's a very unhappy worm staring down the barrel of a blender. So personally, I'd rather take the intelligently designed synergistic blend every time. I really think that's the biggest takeaway here. Nattokinase by itself is already impressive. But once you understand how these enzymes work together, you can see why this category has exploded. But here's the problem. It only works if the products contain what their labels say they do. That's one of the reasons I believe what we're doing here at Natural Informant is so important, because we've sent many of the most popular and some not so popular enzyme blends off to a lab for testing. And in our next video, we're going to reveal the third-party tested activity levels inside these products so we can all find out which companies are actually telling the truth. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and if you want updates whenever new content is released, subscribe to the Natural Informant newsletter so you don't have to rely on the algorithm. Oh, and don't forget to comment and share this content with anyone you think will benefit. Again, I'm Danny Curtin. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.